Hey, it's Sam, and I'm talking today about the fourth house in Vedic Astrology. So, the fourth house comes after the third house, right? Where we gather a lot of information and try a lot of things in the third house. We pursue our interests and those things that we like to do for our own enjoyment, pleasure, happiness. We have a lot of those things where we like entertainment, we like to have fun, and they create a feeling in our heart in the fourth house. So the fourth house is the feeling in your heart, how you feel. That sounds very general, but it's actually very specific. We're often disconnected to how we feel, and we come to find how we feel based on all the frenetic, crazy activity that we are performing through the third house. If you remember, in the third house, it's actually the house of ego. That's what it is. Those qualities of the ego, which has a lot of things that we want to enjoy, and interest, and friends, and I want this, this desire, all those desires. And all of that stuff creates a feeling in our heart. The ego creates a feeling. What is that feeling? So what happens is, based on those activities, based on the feeling, we wind up shifting our activities. So let's say, I use the example of, we're raised in a certain environment, which is the second house, and that environment has certain interests associated with it. Like, let's say, I use my example of like fishing and hunting and all of these things. I grew up with those kinds of activities just by default because of how I was raised and my values, second house, third house activities and interests. But then, as I grew up, those interests created a feeling in my heart. I remember the time when I first realized just how much I hated fishing. I grew up fishing on the Chesapeake Bay. There's a dog over here. And you just grow up sort of doing what you do. And I remember one time when I went fishing, and I pulled a fish out of the water, and the fish swallowed the hook, and then the hook came out its eye. It was like, so in order to get the hook out of the fish's mouth, I had to pull out its eye. And that was when I had kind of had enough. And there had been similarly gross things before. I mean, pulling a hook out of any fish is not pleasant. You're ripping its guts out. And I was always somewhat aware of, this is what I'm doing. It wasn't like some unconscious, But as I got to be older, like when this was about 9 or 10, when I started to get serious. I just went into the Saturn Dasha, by the way. And all of a sudden, I felt just awful. And I just never could do it again. Because the activity, third house, created a feeling in my heart, fourth house, which made me say, I don't want to do this thing anymore. This is not something that I'm really interested in. This is not an interest that's going to continue. Similarly, I had other interests. I loved to play sports. I loved to play baseball especially. I loved music. I always had an interest in it. So we have a lot of interests, and several of those third house interests. This dog is so cute. Hey there, you're just dying to know what I'm doing, aren't you? Look. You're just dying. He's dying to know what I'm doing. Sorry. Third house interests, right? Fourth house feeling, right? So, baseball, music, these are interests I had that in my heart, they resonated much more deeply. And then those third house interests, the ones that resonate in your heart, go much deeper. They go into your heart in a place of love, and they resonate. Other ones, they sink into your heart and they create a repulsion. This is what's in your heart. The fourth house is that reservoir of attractions and repulsions. You get that gut feeling, right? And so those things that are your true nature from the first house create these interests in the third house, which generate a feeling in the fourth house. And then those things that are those interests and those activities and actions through the ego that are actually congruent with your deeper nature wind up becoming amazing joys and heart's desires and passions and things that you create in the fifth house. We'll obviously talk about the fifth house in the next video. But we want to stay with the fourth house and say it's that feeling that is generated from the things you're doing. The things you're doing. In many ways, the third house is like the things you're doing. It's the stuff you're doing, like I said in the last video. Your interests, your activities, a lot of what we call the ego. It's also what's called the Sahaj Bhava, the third house, which is the natural state. Your natural state is the ego, through the physical, through your desires. And those actions and that will, that willfulness, as an individual separate being, in the third house creates a feeling in the fourth house. So you have to realize that whatever you're feeling and whatever is going deepest is what you're creating. So this is why it's very clear, or it's very important to get clear about what's in your heart. And again, the heart is just it's an open reservoir. It's not an action. It's just how the stuff feels. And this is very much about the even houses, house 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, are actually receptive. The fourth house is like the receptacle of the third. The actions in the third house and all that activity like deposit in the fourth house and create a feeling. It's like a receptive place where we need to connect with how that feels. And as I've been saying about the continuum of houses as well, the third house has its origin in the second house, and its culminating point in the fourth house. Values lead to interests, lead to a feeling in our heart. Then with the fourth house, again, the beginning point of the fourth house is the third house, which is those interests. Then they lead to the feeling, and then the feeling leads to the fifth house, which is what we create. And we're always creating what's in our heart. If we have chaos, confusion, anger, hostility in our heart, then that's what we create everywhere. So you want to really sink in and connect with that fourth house of feeling. It's the main house of meditation, by the way, more than anything else when we're trying to meditate. The fourth house and the 12th house. But the fourth house is our personal experience of the heart and what we're trying to calm down when we meditate, and the main reason we can't concentrate when we meditate. The main reason we can't concentrate is because the fourth house vrittis, thought waves, are jumping all over the place. And so instead, what happens when we surrender and let go, we escape from reality into unreality in the 12th house. So the fourth house is the origin point of our escape and surrender. When we can calm the mind and heart, which is the fourth house, then our means of escape is not impure. We're not getting into escapism and running away from life. We're actually escaping into the truth through meditation. So the fourth house is that reservoir of feeling that's much deeper than the emotion. And again, because we don't know ourselves, we usually hang out on the surface of the heart, on the surface of the fourth house, where all of this activity and all this world creates all these emotions, So this is the way you usually experience yourself in the fourth house, is all these emotions on the surface, right? Day to day, you're just a lot of emotions on the surface. But again, notice how what's deeper than that, and those things that settle into a deeper level in your heart, those are the things that you create a lot in your life. And so it's very important to sink deeper than just the emotions. If the activities and your activities through the third house are distracting and stimulated and just all about ego and willfulness and desire and those limited things, it's going to create that kind of mess in your heart. And you're going to need to change those activities. And by the way, meditation is an activity. You do it. It's an interest. And it's usually an interest that takes some time. But we learn how to calm down our ego and our need for stimulation. And the more we're able to do that, the more we're able to calm the heart. And by the way, the third house also includes those things we like, as I said, but that implicates things like music and like entertainment and things we enjoy. So notice the difference even in your heart and in your mind and consciousness when you listen to a certain kind of music or another kind of music. Or you do a certain kind of activity like going out and blaring lights and all that, and something like a calm, peaceful park. And there's a place for all of it, right? It's not a judgment. It's just notice the difference in the mind with these different activities, and that's how the third house becomes the fourth house. And eventually we're trying to calm down the nature of the fourth house so it's peaceful, so that we can hear that silent music of the soul. We can't hear the silence of the mind and the heart when there's all that loud blaring activity on the surface. So fourth house is that stillness and peace in your heart. And it's most importantly, or as important, the process is where third house interests resonate in our heart, truthfully showing us, this is not congruent with who I am, so I'm going to do something different. Many of the people that I grew up with, like I said, the ones, I couldn't stand the fishing and all that. It's remarkable how many people that I grew up with in that neighborhood still live there. I grew up in a little neighborhood. They love it. So they were born and raised somewhere that was totally in alignment. Some of us weren't. So ponder that depth of the heart in the fourth house and how it leads to the creative output and heart's desire in the fifth house.